All right, what is up, everyone? I hope you're all having a great day today. I am here with a Superman 2025 review, and I gotta say, man, this movie was ass. My goodness, this was straight up one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I know that might be controversial because it's getting incredible reviews online. Fans seem to have enjoyed it, but I can't even fathom that anyone would come out of that movie with anything other than complete disdain because that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen, especially from the standpoint of a Superman fan. Now, I just want to start by saying this is going to have spoilers. I'm going to talk about a lot of the things that happen in the movie, so if you don't want any spoilers, then you don't have to watch. This is your warning right here. So, when it was first announced that James Gunn was going to be the leader of DC and directing the new Superman movie, the flagship title, the biggest DC superhero, I was a little bit concerned because although I love James Gunn, he's so used to doing goofy movies and movies that take themselves a little less seriously. Now, don't get me wrong, there are obviously great narratives in those movies as well. I love Guardians of the Galaxy. I think all three movies are very good and very enjoyable. I like Suicide Squad as well. I even like Scooby Doo from back in the day. I think that's where James Gunn does his best work. I think James Gunn's a great filmmaker. I just don't see Superman as maybe the medium in which he can work at his best. And that was my main concern. And my concerns were completely correct because this movie is exactly what I thought it would be. Did not take itself very seriously at all. Way too many jokes. It just felt really disjointed, and I'm going to get a little bit deeper into that later. But I just wanted to start by saying this was what I expected to happen. Now, I didn't think I would dislike the movie as much as I did, but something just really bothered me while I watched this movie because it felt almost like you were taking all of like the nerd Snyderverse haters and just putting all of their thoughts into one movie. It didn't really feel like it was directed by James Gunn and written by James Gunn. It felt like I was watching a Twitter thread in real time. And I'll give you guys a few examples of this. So, one of the main issues that a lot of people had with Man of Steel was that Superman didn't do enough to minimize the destruction during the battle between him and General Zod. And on a surface level, I can understand that concern because we know as Superman, he always tries to minimize damage. He always tries to save as many lives as possible. But if you think about it in terms of the narrative, it wouldn't have made sense for Superman to be able to stop Zod and somehow relocate him. And either way, that's a separate debate. But in Superman 2025, for example, there's a point in time where there's like a kaiju creature that is literally hundreds of feet tall and taller than the buildings in the universe of where Superman takes place. And he somehow just happens to spawn in the only area of the city where there's no buildings in just a circle. There's buildings surrounding him, no footprints, no damage from how he got there. He's just there. And then when the Justice Gang and Superman manage to kill him, he doesn't move any inches. He doesn't kill anyone, doesn't really wreck any buildings. He sets one building on fire, but miraculously everyone escapes unscathed. And it's stuff like this that just really takes the immersion out. It takes you out of the movie because I'm like, there's no way a threat like this wouldn't damage anything, wouldn't injure anyone. It doesn't make any sense. And it's not even the fact that Superman stopped him from doing that. Superman couldn't even kill him. They needed the whole Justice Gang to stop the guy, but he still didn't even manage to take a few footsteps to the right or left or north or south and damage really anything, and no one got hurt. So that's just one example where it's like, okay, they're clearly taking that issue from Man of Steel into account, but it's more of like an overcorrection to the point where it doesn't even seem realistic at all. And another example is at the end of the movie, obviously this is a spoiler, but there's basically an interdimensional split kind of tearing apart Metropolis. And in order to stop there from being some sort of like cataclysm and a lot of deaths, they evacuate the city in the span of about 10 minutes. So in about 10 minutes, every resident of Metropolis escapes. And it's almost just like, come on, dude. Like you're insulting my it feels like I was watching a movie for little kids, which I understand if you wanted to make it a kids movie, that's what this is. This is definitely a kids movie. But and then afterwards, they just magically put the fucking city back together. Like the technology in this movie was so all over the place as well. Like they had technology that seemed like it was from the 3000s, but they were dressing like they were in the 1990s. Like Everything about this movie was just weird and disjointed to me. And on that note, another thing that I really didn't like was how they just dropped us into year three of Superman. Zero backstory. Zero backstory for any of the other characters involved. You don't really know much about any of the Justice Gang, Lois, how he got to Daily Planet. They don't really tell you any of that. They kind of just expect you to know, which I get it. You probably know a lot about Superman if you're a Superman fan. Justice Gang, people aren't going to know who any of these characters are. So you're not really going to be able to make me emotionally attached to any of these characters without showing me anything about them, really. Now, before I go into any of the characters individually, I want to talk a little bit about the plot of Superman. And this is kind of what I'd like to describe as all balls, no cock. Because, on the surface, you got flashy colors, you got all these cool characters, you got Superman, Lex Luthor. On the surface, it looks like a great movie. But when you actually get into the plot, there's no meat. And the fact is that there really wasn't any plot. They try to get you to believe that the plot is about Lex Luthor trying to fund war between fake Israel and fake Palestine in order to become king of one of those areas. But, it turns out that that's actually not really the plot. The plot is just Lex Luthor hates Superman so bad that he just wants to kill him, which, whatever, Lex Luthor is a top tier hater. So I'll take that. But there wasn't a real compelling plot in the movie. I didn't really feel like there was a threat anytime in the film. I didn't feel like there was going to be real consequences. So overall, I don't really have a lot to say about the plot because there kind of wasn't any. Also, I wanted to say, James Gunn, when you're doing a political commentary, it's supposed to be a little more subtle than that. If I can tell exactly what you're talking about almost verbatim between what's happening in the real world between Israel and Palestine, it's too much. Like, it's too obvious. It's taken me out of the theater. It's taken me into real life, which I'm not trying to do, right? I'm there to watch a movie and be entertained. So now I want to get into each of the characters. Now, I'm not going to get to everyone, but I'll try to hit the ones that I thought mattered the most. So we'll start with the man of the hour, Superman, played by David Cornsweet. Now, I think the casting was very well done. I actually think Cornsweet fits Superman perfectly. Maybe not as good as Henry Cavill in my opinion, but whatever, I'm a little bit biased. He doesn't have the aura, no homo. But he's still a great casting. He's got charisma, he looks good. So yeah, great casting choice. I just think what James Gunn gave him here was not a lot to work with. We barely really get any time with him as Clark Kent, aside from the beginning of the movie, which started off pretty good. I thought the movie started off better than it finished. David Cornsweet's performance as Clark was good when we had those sections of the movie. There just wasn't enough there for me to really get emotionally invested at all with him as Clark Kent. So I'd say as Superman, he did an okay job. It's just kind of weird because they made him into like this too much of a nice guy. It's another example of where they're taking the criticism with Man of Steel too literally and overcorrecting because I don't know how many times I need Superman to tell me, oh, I'm human. I'm so much of a good person. I don't judge people. Don't judge immigrants and aliens. I'm saving squirrels. I'm saving little girls. It's like, dude, we know Superman does this stuff. I don't need to be shown. I'm not like a baby. You know what I mean? Like, it just seemed like they were throwing stuff in there, throwing shit at the wall. Like, oh, yeah, they're going to eat this up. And people are eating it up, which is ironic. I honestly can't believe it. But in terms of a character, I think it fell a little bit flat. I think the script was complete dog shit. The lines that David Cornsweet was forced to perform were hilariously bad. Like, for example, there's one part of the movie where Lois Lane says to him, you view everyone as beautiful no matter what. And Clark Kent's like, maybe that's the new punk rock. And I was just like, I cringed out of my seat. Like, it was genuinely so bad to watch. Like, I felt bad for the actors while I was watching it. So there's lines like that throughout the movie, tons of them, by the way. That's just one example that I can think of on the top of my head. So as far as Superman goes, pretty good casting, horrible character, and horrible writing. Now let's get to my least favorite character in the film, Lois Lane, Superman's ball and chain. She's played by Rachel Brosnahan, I think her name is. Decent casting, I mean, I guess, for what it's worth. I don't think it's a crazy part to have to cast, especially with the writing in this movie. But I think she is legitimately one of the worst characters in the movie. She's constantly talking about breaking up with Superman and how shit's not gonna work out. She even mentions to Mr. Terrific, "Oh, I was gonna break up with him." Like, dude, are you making me want to hate this lady? Like, I don't know what they were thinking with her character. She's supposed to be a loyal to the core character. Not all this second guessing and wanting to break up. Like, it was just weird. I just got like really bad vibes from her character. I think James Gunn hates women because the women in this movie were not great. Not gonna lie. Um, so yeah, her character, it wasn't really giving Lois Lane. Just the one section when she interviews Clark at the beginning of the movie was good. After that, it was dog shit. She doesn't do any investigative journalism in the movie, as we've seen from the past iterations. Jimmy Olsen does more investigative journalism than her in the movie, which another character that's so bad. But first, we're talking about Lois, and in terms of her lines, there was some cringe lines, like I said, with Superman as well. Overall, forgettable. I don't really care about her. I thought she sucked, and that's about it for her. Now on to the guy I just mentioned, Jimmy Olsen. I'm not going to talk too much about him because he was all right. He was a little bit funny, but his character has one of the worst tropes in movies where it's ugly, dorky nerd doesn't like the clearly attractive lady that wants his meat. It's like the whole movie, he's talking to Lex Luthor's girlfriend, and she's obviously super attractive, and he's like, "Ew, she's gross." Like, "Oh, people think you're hot." At the end of the movie, he's like, "People think you're hot," like in his head, and I'm like, dude, like this is so goofy. One of the worst tropes. Like, it's just like ridiculous. I don't know, man. Like, I was like, dude, stop. Like, at least make her ugly if you're gonna have that type of character in there. Why is she hot? It was ridiculous. But that's really all I got to say about him. There's really nothing to remember. He was all right, I guess. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Justice Gang. I thought, Green Lantern Guy Gardner was good. He was funny. He had actually good lines compared to the rest of the cast. Hawkgirl sucked. Didn't like her. Couldn't even remember what she said. She kept making that weird face in every scene. And Mr. Terrific was also pretty good. They kind of went really stereotypical with him, but I'm not going to really talk about that. But he was solid. He had good action scenes. I'm not going to really complain about them too much. They were okay. I just wish we got a little bit more backstory or a little bit more, development and a deep dive into some of their characters so you could connect a little bit better. I don't think there was really a big focus on them, even though they were in a lot of the movie, which is weird to say, but that's kind of just what I felt. Um, so yeah, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kents in this movie. I mean, I get that they're supposed to be farmers and they're from the South and maybe they're a little bit less educated than the people in the city, but James, you didn't have to make them literal retards. Like, I genuinely couldn't believe how stupid they were. Fucking Ma Kent couldn't even speak. She sounded like she didn't even know English. She was like, "Oh, Clark, I don't know how to work the phone." Like, I was like, dude, this is such a downgrade from what we've gotten in the past. And aside from Pa Kent's one little section where he kind of motivates Superman a little bit, he almost can't speak English either. It's like, dude, they have like 10 IQ. I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't feel that wisdom that you're used to from the Kents in comics and in the last movies that we had from Superman. So it was just ridiculous. And then obviously they turned Jor-El and Superman's mom into white supremacists essentially. Weird choice and huge retcon that I think was pointless and kind of just used as a plot device to make Superman feel bad. "Oh, my parents don't wanted me to not be a good person." Wah. Just horrible, dude. Like, everything felt like it was just, there was no substance to anything in this movie, and that's my biggest issue with it. Now, the last character I want to talk about is obviously Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult. And I think Nicholas Hoult is such a good actor that he managed to carry utter dog shit that was given to him by James Gunn, because I could bear his role. I thought Lex Luthor was pretty good. I thought, his performance was great. You really get the feeling that he just hates Superman with all of his heart, and that is what Lex Luthor is. He's a top one hater, and you got that in this film. And he's intelligent. He's cunning. He's has no remorse, and I just really liked what they did with Lex Luthor. I wish the rest of the cast was a little bit better. They could have made Lex a little bit less goofy and a little bit more serious, but then again, man, it's a James Gunn movie, so what am I gonna expect? But yeah, Nicholas Holt's great. Can't really fuck up with him, right? All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the action sequences in this movie. And once again, just not great. Nothing about it felt realistic. It didn't feel like there was any grit, any consequences really, or any stakes. There was some cool sequences. Like when Superman does the twist with the laser eyes and like kills all those enemies. I don't remember what they were called, but that part was cool. But other than that, just left a lot to be desired. They really underpowered Superman in this movie. They nerfed the living shit out of him. He did not feel like he was strong. You didn't really get that sense that he's the strongest superhero. Like it felt like he was very beatable, and that's something I don't like. I really wanted Superman to feel more like, the pinnacle of what it is. They mention that he's the strongest metahuman, but it doesn't really feel like that when you're watching the movie. It feels like he's just another superhero, and that completely goes against what Superman is. Superman is, for all intents and purposes, a god amongst men. So there's that. And the action sequences didn't help at all. Now, my bad, I did forget to talk about Crypto, the super dog. He's all right. He's pretty much just a plot device in the movie that they use for Superman to get mad at Lex. But he's fun, he's cute, even though he's legit just a fully CGI dog. But there's really not much to say about him. He's a dog. What am I going to talk about? So, guys, overall, I just didn't think this was a great movie, especially not for the standards I have for a character like Superman. If I had to give it a rating based on enjoyment, because, I'm not too hard to please, I could turn my brain off and enjoy stuff. I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. If I was actually being critical, dude, this is like a 3 out of 10 at best. I think this is genuinely a horrible movie, especially narratively and in terms of writing. But, anyways, guys, that's it for my Superman review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you disagree, leave a comment below, like, subscribe. Peace.